Welcome to the program today. Mondo Gonzales here in studio, and we have a great program which is going to be really fun for me because we get to talk with our good friend Graham all the way from England in town, which is awesome. Before we go to him, I want to remind everybody about our upcoming conference that we're going to be having in Colorado Springs, June 27th through 30th. You can find all the information if you want to join us, certainly at prophecywatchers.com, but also, watchersweekendcolorado.com as well. We're going to have over 20 speakers there. Again, all of your favorites. You're going to be able to sit and chat with them and just hang out, see all the new things that they are writing and researching about. It's going to be a great time. And of course, who doesn't want to be in Colorado in the summertime? I know I do. So certainly invite you to come out for that. If you can't be there, as always, we want to invite you to join us through live stream. But for now, Graham, Keelan, all the way from Western England. Do you say that? Would you say Western England?
Yeah, the west of England.
The west of England.
Yes.
That's right, because Wales, you're not in Wales.
No.
But Wales is right there, and Wales is a separate country.
Yes, it is. Yeah, please say that.
Yeah, we're us Americans, we tend to think of England, and that covers everything, but the British Empire is not just England, is it?
No, it's certainly not. And it never, it was, well, you mentioned that it was the empire itself was at its peak, took a quarter of the Earth's landmass,
wow,
and a quarter of the world's population.
That's pretty amazing.
That certainly is, from that little place there in the North Atlantic.
Yeah. So I had a chance last fall to go and speak in England and also in other places, as many as you might know, but I got to hang out with Graham for a whole week, and we had a good time. And again, we spoke together at the conference, and so here we are. For those watching, we are heading towards the wrap up of our Road to Zion series. This is number 12, Clothed with the Sun, and we're going to get into that. And then we got one more to go, and it's great to be here in person versus computers and stuff. But for the sake of the audience here, again, we've had a lot of great feedback on what we've been doing. And so kind of give us, I like to just remind people, because sometimes maybe it's been a while since they chimed in and watched us, kind of what started this whole thing, and then kind of give us the overview of where we've been and where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, what did start it? I think the current war in Gaza started it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we just decided we should say, well, when you came over, we had the conference, and I sensed from the Lord that what we should be talking about was Israel and the Rapture. And then 3 weeks after we had the conference, the war in Gaza broke out. So it's topical, and we deliberately stayed away from the actual mechanics of the war because other people are commenting on that. We just wanted to, I think, take a step back and just, okay, what's the story here? Mm-hmm. It's not just, the current war or even 1948. I think whether I've said this before, it's worth repeating. People think it began in 1948. Mm-hmm. And I say, well, it did, but 1948 BC.
That's right.
So it's
the birth of, if you do the calculations in the Hebrew text, it actually is very clear. He was, according to the Hebrew text, he was born 1948 years after creation.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so there you go. I did not know it was that accurate.
It was, yep.
So we're doing the story of 4,000 years of Israel, and a remarkable story it is of the redemptive plan for it and for the nations. Mm-hmm. And we're part of that plan. So we've covered a lot of ground. Last week, the last episode, should I say, we actually got to the 67 war. We'd covered the Independence War. We'd covered Mandate period before that. We'd covered AD 70 before that. We've just covered a whole lot of material. And like you say, we're on the final lap. We're coming down the home straight on this one, Mondo. And this is where it gets good, exciting, because like you, I love prophecy. And this is where we can maybe step out of the history now and just step into, okay, so what does the scripture say about the future, where we're going? So that's where we'll go next.
Yeah, and when we think about that, it's fascinating that, again, there are some in the Christian world who are genuine Christians, but who have really no interest in Israel. They think that the state of modern Israel is nothing significant, and that's okay. I mean, we agree to disagree on that in an agreeable way. But the key thing here is looking again, when we look to the past. Again, God starting obviously always had a plan, but picking one guy, Abram, who lived in Mesopotamia, who was an idol worshiper, according to Joshua 24, verse 2. He's an idol worshiper across the river. And God said, I want you to go somewhere, and I'm going to tell you where to go. And he's 75 years old, he responds, and then from that, God makes him some promises, as we know in Genesis 12. And through him, he's going to make his name great, he's going to bless all the nations of the world. And of course, the Old Testament follows the progression of his family, arrives in the person of Jesus being part of that family and lineage. And then, of course, it's not just they get dispelled in AD 70 AD, but then they come back. But it's not just, okay, well, Israel's here now, 1948, that's it. No, there's a future. And so anybody that would say that Israel's not important, it's unfortunate, because you can't come and think about the future, even Jesus' return. It is centered around this tiny little nation, of 8-9 million people in the Middle East. And what you said so long ago in this series was, again, based on the war, was this is God's land.
Indeed it is, mm-hmm. Yes. And I would just pick up on that and just to say it's even the circle is even smaller, Mondo. It's not centered around this land as such. It's centered around a city, mm-hmm. Just this even smaller city.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we're going to look at, right now. That it's the city of destiny for the world, and which is why it's causing so much problems for the world.
Yeah, when you think about, and we're talking about Jerusalem, where God chose to put his name. The word appears over 800 times in the Bible. And when you think about this current situation, which we're not going to talk about that, but just kind of a side fact, it appears 0 times in the Quran. 0. And yet, you would think that, within the Muslim world, that this is as valuable as Mecca or Medina, and it is not. 0 times in the Quran, 800 times, in the Bible. And so that's the Jerusalem, Zechariah 12, God says very clearly that the city is going to be, God is going to organize it in such a way that it's going to become a burdensome stone to all nations. And man, here we are. I mean, not only has it begun to be fulfilled, but we're not done yet.
We're not done yet. We're not, because we're moving now into the end game. But this is, I suppose, take a football or a soccer analogy. We're into extra time now. This is where it gets really intense. Somebody has to win this battle.
Yep.
Over this city. So this is where we're heading on this.
And I know we're going to get into some of the details, but if it's okay, which I think helps shape our conversation, for the next remaining time. We've seen this in the Bible, but talk about the tale of 2 cities.
Yes.
Is that okay to bring that up now?
Yeah, yes. Because it's going to play into exactly what we're talking about. I was years and years ago. I was kind of like had a manuscript, sort of like I should call it the Tale of 2 Cities. Of course, our audience would hopefully know it's a reference to Dickens, and the 2 cities for there is London and Paris. Well, there's a greater tale of 2 greater cities, and they're the cities that are presented to us right at the beginning of this story, and it's the city that Abraham is looking for, whose builder and maker is God, because he's been told to come out of his leave, Ur of the Chaldees, to come out of there into a land I will show you. So he's looking for a city. That's what he says in Hebrews. This heavenly country is how Paul refers to it. He's not talking about heaven. He's talking about the heavenly country. In other words, the country where God rules, where his cities rule. Of course, he goes into this land of Canaan, And it's filled with the same cities he's just left.
These Amorites and Canaanites.
And you're thinking, and why don't you just leave me there, you know? But God has this great plan to bring forth a city in the earth, the city of the great king, as it would become. And he meets Melchizedek there. Boy, we're going into this really deeply quickly, right?
Yeah.
And so we have the introduction there to the city whose builder and maker, because he's the high priest after the order of, he's the high priest of El Elyon, the God Most High. But the city that he is kind of moving out of, okay, there is his individual city of Ur, but it's Babylon, basically.
Babylon.
It's Babylon. And so...
I mean, that's the shadow. He's living really in the shadow of Babylon.
And it was the Amorites who were King Hammurabi and all of that, who were sort of they founded what we understand as Babylon. You know, the city of Babylon, and then the sphere of Babylon. And it's interesting. So Abraham gets this promise. He's wandering around, Mondo, and God tells him, you're going to be wanderers here, you and your seed, and you're going to be enslaved and what have you. And you'll be strangers in a land which is not your own. And because it was not their own, it was not their own until they came out, but it was promised to him. And it says until the sins of the Amorites, because the sins of the Amorites are not yet filled. Well, you could exchange that. The sins of Babylon are not yet filled. Have not yet come to full. And then, when the sins of Babylon, then the great exchange is going to happen. So there's a pattern there. So the two cities we were introduced to at the beginning, Babylon and Jerusalem. And that's the two cities that begin the book, and those are the two cities that end the book. And in the book of Revelation, those two cities are personified as two women. You have the woman which we'll get to, the woman in Revelation chapter 12, and then the woman is in Revelation 16, 17, isn't it? 17 thereabouts. Babylon, the great prostitute. And both of these women are adorned with jewelry, with precious, but who's adorning who? Who is? So we have here the idea. I don't know if we want to go into this straight away, or
I'll just say this, and then we will, because I always, and this is the summary. We like Grandma. I spent a lot of time talking. Driving around England, driving around Oklahoma, Arkansas. We get a lot of car time. But if you get into, we're going to get into some of the minutia and the details, which is always fun. But just for your sake, in thinking about this, don't lose the big picture. And from the beginning, it's always God's rule, God's city, God's people, God's Messiah, and the other kingdoms rule. Babylon, Satan's own son, if you want to call him the Antichrist, whatever. But we have the Babylonian. I mean, think about it. As Americans, as the West, we have Sunday, the day of the sun. We got Monday, the day of the moon. I mean, these are all astrological, even getting into our 60 minutes, 60 seconds, that's all Babylonian. We are recipients of that kingdom in the West, and sometimes we don't even know it. Ishtar, again, we just, recently, if you talk about Easter and other things like that, the names. So you have these two competing kingdoms, and they're there, they're around us, and it's always the offer. Are you going to serve God, or are you going to serve not God? All the kingdoms rooted in Babylon. And that's why there's this great rejoicing. The heavens are rejoiced, and we'll get into that in the book of Revelation when Babylon falls. I mean, rejoice heaven. I mean, she's fallen. It's amazing. Like, I didn't even know. What do you mean? I mean, if you're an average Christian or an American or whatever, you're going to go, I didn't know. Babylon? Really? That's that important? But yes, it's this theme that permeates through all of Scripture. Again, going back to Nimrod, going to Babel. I mean, we're seeing this in Genesis 10. It's in the first book, in the first 11 chapters. So let's jump in here, if you don't mind. If you got your Bibles, we're going to be in Revelation 12. Is it okay if I read that?
Yeah, you go ahead.
And then you get your comments on it.
Yeah.
And Revelation chapter 12. And we know, look, there's various viewpoints on this, and Graham will kind of give us what the different options. But I think what Graham is saying here, we want to give him the freedom to share again, this idea of the two women here. But chapter 12 says, "Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days." So let's go ahead and just kind of take it away, so to speak, and kind of give us your thoughts here.
Thank you, Mondo. So that's a great introduction there, isn't it? So, you know, there's been a lot of discussion and debate about who this woman is. The first thing I want to say is you know, a lot of people take this as astro prophecy, you know, in other words, it's prophecy predicted in the stars. And I'm not saying
like actual constellations.
Constellations. I'm not saying there isn't the gospel in the stars. That's not what I'm saying. But this idea here that this particular woman, as if John is somehow sat in a cosmic planetarium, you know, watching Jupiter moving into place, and I'm not convinced, because if this is astro prophecy, then is there any astro prophecy for the woman in Revelation? You know,
or even the dragon.
You know, the dragon. So it's almost like this. John is seeing. He's seeing. It's not a cartoon, but he's actually seeing a vision. He's seeing characters in this vision. He's seeing a woman. She's clothed with the sun, and all of that. We'll get into the symbolism there. And it is symbolism.
It's a sign.
It's a sign. So I don't think listen, you know, there might be room for some astro prophecy here, but I don't think that is the basis.
The main point.
The main point here in Revelation. You know, and especially now, because you know we have done the eclipse, and people are looking for signs in the heavens. And we had this, I think, in 2017. I think you mentioned.
We did a video on this in the sense of discussing this sign and whether it was astral prophecy. You can find it on our YouTube channel as well. September of 2017, referring to the planet Jupiter being in the constellation Virgo for 9 months. You know, 9 months in the womb she's a pregnant. A lot of interesting things there, and again, there's a lot of people that agree and disagree on that, but that's kind of what people really were attracted to, that based on the Revelation 12
sure.
idea.
But I think if we just put the astro prophecy aside a minute and just actually look at this as a vision that John is having, and so, you know, quickly then, you know, the few things that we have, people have interpreted who the woman is Mary. Obviously, you know, Mary, and then she gives birth to Jesus. That doesn't really work for the rest. I don't know if you agree with me on that. For the rest of the scriptures, because how does she run into the wilderness for 12, 60 days and what have you? The other one, of course, is that, I think this is a Catholic view as well, is that the woman is the church, right? But then, you know, how does the man-child, the
church didn't give birth to Jesus, it was the opposite of the way around, right? Yeah.
Now, and obviously the big giveaway here, and it's common in dispensational circles, you know, that the woman here is going to be Israel, got the crown of 12 stars, etc., clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet. It kind of sounds a bit like Joseph's dream, right? With Jacob,
Genesis 37,
you know, and that's good. But I looked at that and I thought, I was thinking, but is it precise enough? You know, is it specific enough? And as I was doing this story, and it's taken me some years to, you know, go through the story, I just kind of came to my own conclusion. I trust, you know, as I felt led. Of course, we all can be wrong in our leadings, but the woman here is not Israel; it's Jerusalem. It's the city herself. And then there are various connecting points here, which I was able to dig into, which actually I think really brings that out. So we can just have a look at some of these connecting points here. So what do we have here? Well, we have the woman, and you know, if the woman is the city of Jerusalem, that's what I'm going to present, that the woman is the city of Jerusalem. So it's this last day's battle here, which actually begins earlier on, but the last day's battle here is the consummation of the conflict between the two women, the two cities, Babylon. Like you say, you know, you're in America, I'm in England, but effectively, even though we're in, you know, Christian nations, as it were, we're all in Babylon.
Yeah.
We're still all in Babylon,
yeah.
you know.
The ripples and effects of Babylon from, you know,
Yeah.
millennia ago
Yeah.
are still here.
Yeah. Which is why we're called out of Babylon to a city, and of course, you know, the heavenly city of Jerusalem. So this is our calling. And of course, this prophecy then does tie in with the Daniel 70 weeks prophecy, the 1,260 days. So we'll look at that too. But this idea here of the crown on the woman. Now the crown, Mondo, denotes rulership, right? And in Zechariah chapter 2, both the high priest, if you remember, I know you do, the high priest, Joshua the high priest, he's given a crown, right? And of course, he's anointed in Jerusalem. That's where the temple is. That's where the house is. It's in Jerusalem. And also the royal crown of David is in Jerusalem, right? So you have this idea of the woman wearing the crown, and the crown has the 12 stars. In other words, the 12 tribes are represented in this crown, right? So because Jerusalem is the city which God chooses out of all of the tribes of Israel. And it's going to be very interesting where Jerusalem is actually located. So this idea then of the royal crowns belong to Jerusalem. Also, if you look at Ezekiel chapter 16, there's that famous kind of parable there about how Jerusalem's likened to a baby who God discovers in the wilderness, right? Cuts the cord, takes her home, nurses her, brings her into childhood. I know it sounds perverse, but it's not. We bring our perverse minds to that. But it's the idea then what he does, he presents her as a bride, you know, and it says he gives her a crown. He says here in Ezekiel 16:12, I put a beautiful crown upon your head. And he's talking about Jerusalem. He's not talking about Israel as a whole. So Jerusalem does have this imagery all the way back in the Old Testament as being a woman, I know there is the virgin Israel as well, but particularly Jerusalem it's the crown. And just to read here 2 Chronicles chapter 7, I'll go quickly because we want to get through a lot today. It says, then the Lord appeared to Solomon in the night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and I have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. If my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face, well, where? From that place, right? And turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Where? From that place, right? So Jerusalem is the key here. It's not even, he's hearing the prayers from Jerusalem.
It's not Bethel, it's not, pick a place, it's not Bet Shemesh, it's Jerusalem.
Yeah, because Jerusalem is the crown, is the crown virgin. For now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayer that is made in this place. For now I have chosen and consecrated this house, that my name may be there forever. That's what God does. In a marriage, he gives his name, right? For my eyes and my heart will be there for all time. So then we get this picture there. We're moving on to this, like Jerusalem is clothed with a wedding garment, right? This is sort of like the imagery here, clothed with the sun. And so Jerusalem has the priestly garment. It has a royal garment, again there in Ezekiel chapter 16. And you tie that together with Ecclesiastes, where the king, the bridegroom has gone missing. Do you remember how that plays out? And so the bride is
like in the Song of Solomon.
The Song of Solomon, excuse me, Song of Solomon. Thank you for the correction. She's looking, where is my beloved? And she's looking in Jerusalem for her beloved, right? So again, it's this idea of the marriage there in Jerusalem. And so I think this is what we're getting here in this picture with this woman, being clothed with the sun. So, okay, let's have a look at this. Clothed with the sun. What could that possibly be? So I'm going to leave Jacob and all the personalities aside, right? Just a slight detachment from the one in Genesis. Clothed with the sun. Well, it's the idea of the glory of the covenant here, right? The righteousness, right? Because Babylon is clothed with something else, the purple garments. She's clothed with the sun, with righteousness. And of course, we get that.
Blasphemies and everything.
Blasphemies, yeah. And then we get that thing in where it says, it's in Malachi, isn't it? I believe. It says, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings. And the sun there is S-U-N, not S-O-N, you know. So, and Jerusalem, in Isaiah 1:26, Jerusalem is called the city of righteousness. You get that also in Jeremiah. You shall be called the faithful city, the city of righteousness. That's the city of Melchizedek, right? It's do you understand? Israel's righteousness flows through this woman, you know. So if Jerusalem is righteous, this is where the temple is. Atonement is made in Jerusalem, and from that it flows out to all the cities of Israel, you know, and to all the peoples of the land. The whole land is cleansed by being cleansed in Jerusalem, right? So once again, we also see that Jerusalem is the city of the appointed times, right? Another scripture, I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem built as a city that is bound firmly together, to which the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, as was decreed for Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord. Their thrones for judgment were set. People will recognize that. That's a Daniel verse as well, isn't it? The thrones were set in Jerusalem. So if the clothing there with the sun, if we look at that being glory, the glory of the righteousness, and of course Jerusalem fails in that, but still, this is the great sign of the woman. Do you want to add anything there before?
No, I just what we're looking at here, which I think is amazing, is just again a reminder. We're looking at these two competing kingdoms, and especially in the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation, as we know, is the final book. It's the book of prophecy, and you know the Revelation 19:10. That the Spirit of Jesus is the Spirit of prophecy. And so we're getting this culmination. We've seen it all through the Old Testament, building up into the New Testament, and now when we come to the final book here, God is reminding us of the competing kingdoms, and again, as you were showing here, the centrality of Jerusalem.
Yes, because as secular people, Mondo, what we do, we think of a city, but in the ancient time, the city represented a people.
Yep.
Right? You didn't detach the people from the city. So when it's talking about the city, it's not talking about the bricks and mortar. It's talking about, you know, I will build up your city with and the word there to build is banai. It's in Daniel. Just record. It's sons. I'll build your city with sons, not with bricks. Right? So that's kind of
well, we might say, hey, I was reading a political report and London said. And it's referring to, or Washington said, it's referring to the people and the administration, so to speak. So we have that in our modern language.
Yes, so let's move on. Now she's giving birth. Jerusalem is giving birth, and it says here the moon is under her feet. Or there was, I think it's the King James Mondo. It says standing on the moon. Now I've heard that it was presented that this could be why is the moon under her feet? That this could be a birthing stool because she's about to give birth, right? So and they didn't give birth in those days. How we did it lie on their backs and what have you. So she's on. We get that from the Egyptians. The Egyptian woman, when the women are on their stools, they're already. You know, they've already given birth before we can even. So the idea of the birthing stool, maybe not. But I think what we can certainly say here is because the moon signifies Jerusalem is the city of the appointed feasts, and those feasts are regulated by the moon, not by the sun. So it's all by the lunar cycle. So that's what signifies Jerusalem's appointed times. It's Moedim. Okay. Interestingly, the lunar cycle is a monthly cycle, which corresponds with a woman's monthly fertility
Very
cycle.
close. Yeah, very
Do
close.
you know what I'm saying? So again, there are just some connecting points there that you could, maybe it's a birthing stool, but you know, I'm not going to press it on that. But I think the moon here is it relates to the times, the appointed times of the Lord in Jerusalem, because he says they're my feasts, they're my appointed times, where I will meet you. Where? In Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm going to put my name. At her appointed time, the woman then gives birth to a son. So the woman, Jerusalem, at the appointed time, and this son is to rule all nations. And we'll have a discussion on that quickly. Do you want to add on anything to that? Okay. So now this is interesting, because our immediate thought is to go to Jesus, mm-hmm. right? So this is Jesus. But let's just bear in mind, everything here is symbolic, right? The woman, the crowns, everything.
It points to something. Yep.
It points to something. So the man-child then points to something. Now, for sure, Jesus is the representative of this. Okay. But what is the idea of the man-child? So the man-child here is being caught up to heaven. So again, we've got this idea of priestly and royal language, and people will understand this as we delve into this a bit more. It's the language, but it's also the language of the inheritance of the firstborn, right? So somehow this man-child, because what had to happen in the firstborn ceremonies? God says the firstborn is mine, right? He said the entire nation of Israel is my firstborn. But then through a complicated system, they all have to present their firstborn to him, right? Now, there was no Jerusalem at that time, so I understand that. But as it now comes in, they have to present their firstborn to him. And so, but instead of all of the tribes, for all of the families presenting their firstborn, and all of the tribes rebelled against God with Moses, and it was the tribe of Levi who saved all the other tribes, if you remember the story, mm-hmm. right? Because mm-hmm. of the tribe. And God says, right, that's my tribe now. I'm going to separate them out. And the tribe of Levi, in a way, become the tribe of the firstborn, because God says, I don't need your firstborn, Issachar. I don't need
I'm
Judah.
taking Levi instead.
I'm going to take Levi. So, but they are going to redeem your firstborn. So this exchange went on. How many sons does Levi have? 22,000.
Yeah, it was all these calculations.
Yeah. And so the tribe of Levi then becomes the first, and that's why it has no land allocation, because it's the priestly tribe, and it says they present themselves to God at the temple, but they're doing that on behalf of the nation, right? So the firstborn Israel is being gathered up into the firstborn tribe of Levi. You understand what I'm saying? So that's kind of that's sort of like what's going on there. And as the Levites then present themselves, that's what they do. Every time they go to the service, they're presenting themselves, not just as priests, but they're presenting themselves as representatives of the firstborn, and the whole nation is firstborn, mm-hmm. right? It's just that one being gathered up into the other. But just like the firstborn is presented to God then in his earthly house or temple, so he will be presented to God in his heavenly house and temple, right? And of course, we know that the firstborn is the one who receives charge over his father's house, mm-hmm. his siblings. He receives a double portion. He receives the blessing. We get all of that in the Old Testament narrative. Now, obviously, this relates to Jesus, mm-hmm. but it's not just it's Jesus as the firstborn, because then we see there's a whole company of firstborn that's going to. So people might twig that there's something else going on here about the firstborn being caught up to heaven. And so in that way then, Jesus is the Son of Jerusalem. That's why he's, as were all the children in that sense then, all the tribes, because it's the city appointed for all the tribes, as sons of Jerusalem. Jesus is the son of the law. He's born into the law. And that's why Mary then goes and presents him at the temple. Right? He's presented there. So he's carrying this firstborn status, not only as Mary's firstborn. We know also that Jesus is somehow in the Levitical tribe, although he never accesses it. He never ministers there, because Mary and Elizabeth were cousins. And you could trace the genealogy there to get, because basically, when they came back from exile, they're all thinking, well, who's the Messiah coming through? Oh, he's coming through Judah. You know, he's also, but there's got to be a priest there as well, according to Zechariah, the priest and there'll be a priest on his throne. So the Levites and the Judahites began to intermarry to try and get this. You know, it's got to be my boy. He's going to be picked.
They're
right?
marrying. The tribes are intermarrying.
They're intermarrying. Another thing, another tribe that actually intermarries, which has been promised. And we're going to see that this one is the true firstborn all the way from the book of Genesis is the tribe of Joseph, because there is this tradition in Judaism. There would be the Messiah ben Joseph, the Messiah ben Yosef, as well as the Messiah ben David, the Messiah ben David. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, no. I mean, this is well known in the sense of rabbinic theology, even today. That this is why you have the problem in the first century where they were looking for the Messiah ben David, the political conqueror. David was a conqueror. He was a king. He was all that. The macho guy. Joseph, as we know, suffered 3 years in prison, and so they developed this theology, what they saw in Scripture, like Isaiah 53. Well, here there's this figure, and he's more of, so they developed this two Messiah theory. Instead of we recognize as one person, but two different comings.
Yes. So whoever the Messiah here is has to somehow combine the firstborn tribe line, the Levitical line, the line of David, of Judah, the kingly line, and also the line of Joseph, because we will look at Genesis 49, that prophecy about Joseph. So, who's going to put all that together? Well, okay. So let's have a little discussion here very briefly, because I see our time's running. What about then this idea, going back to Genesis, the sun being Jacob and the moon being his mother? It's quite problematic. Even the rabbis don't know what to do with that, because, of course, Rachel is dead when he has that dream. So is Leah his mother? Leah. And so you're wondering what Jacob's thinking. Well, am I and your mother and your brother's going to come down and worship you? I don't think he understood it, But leaving that aside, we see here, so Jacob's firstborn son is Reuben. He loses that because of what he does, and it goes to the firstborn son of his first love, who is Rachel, because remember, he was tricked into marriage, who is Joseph. And of course, the idea of putting a coat on him, giving him special favor, this is what engendered all that animosity and jealousy from his brothers. He's favored above the others. And so now we see this picture of Joseph coming in and he's carrying the firstborn status of the sons of Israel before there are any tribes. Well, that doesn't dissipate. So there is something in this. It's not abrogated when all the tribes come in. So this firstborn mystery is just being interwoven into Israel's tribes and into its history. Now Rachel also gives birth. So she gives birth to that firstborn son. Joseph receives the double portion. We know that Jesus is Messiah ben Yosef. And so there are indications there. And there are nuances there in the Gospels as well about how Jesus is tied to Joseph. But as we know what happens, Mondo, the northern tribes also split from the two southern tribes, and very acrimonious at times. They went to war one time, right? And so the son of David is coming out of Judah. But if you're in the northern kingdoms and you're of the northern tribes, if you come, you really don't care anymore about the son of David.
It was 7 years he ruled in Hebron alone, right? Before the northern kingdom accepted him.
So after that break, you're now looking for the son of Joseph. The son of Joseph bigger. There's the Messiah ben Yosef. That's who you're looking for.
Yeah, and you see, it's always, you see this Ephraim in Ephraim and Judah. You see these distinctions. Well, Ephraim was the son of Joseph. So you see all throughout the Old Testament, the northern was Ephraim and the southern was Judah, and yet you see those two. Ephraim was one of the bigger tribes. But over and over, those two names were always the one popping up.
Yes, and the fact is, who is going to reconcile these tribes? Because the staff is broken and all of that, right? Now here's a little interesting excursion here. Rachel also gives birth to another son, and she calls him Benoni, right? The son of my suffering. And she dies. Jacob renames him Benjamin, right? The son of my right hand. So this kid is carrying effectively two names. He comes to be known as Benjamin, but the son of my suffering and the son of my right hand. So obviously people are now connecting these dots. I just found it fascinating going through this. I love all this dot connecting. Jerusalem, people might not know, is located in the territory of, do you know? Well, you do know.
Yeah.
Benjamin. Benjamin.
Yep. And Judah's right there below it.
Is right below it. Benjamin. So, hey, hang on a second. God chooses a city out of the tribe of Benjamin, the territory of Benjamin, to be the appointed city. So the two sons of Rachel, Jacob through Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph carries the firstborn status. But we have here, so Jesus is the firstborn son, becomes the son of suffering, before being exalted to the Father to become the son of my right hand, or righteousness, that's what it means. Jerusalem is the city of righteousness. So we can think of Jerusalem in the same way. It's the city of suffering, Benoni, right? It's also the city of God's right hand, Benjamin. And so in a way then, Jerusalem is the city of the firstborn, or the firstborn city. And in Zechariah 2:8 it says the mountain which will be lifted above all the mountains and the cities. That's firstborn status, that's double status. What we have at the minute, Mondo, as our audience will be aware, we do have Jerusalem's just, one of the cities of the nations.
Yep.
Right? And it's the stone. We'll get into the stone on the next one. Who's going to lift this stone? Who something is being built there in Jerusalem which is going to lift it above all the cities of the nations and all the mountains and mountains signify kingdoms in the Old Testament. And I mean, this is the picture we're getting, right? Yeah. This is like coming to the end of the story. So, do you want to add on anything to that?
Well, I think just a reminder as we think about this, God takes that which is, again, insignificant. When we look at Jerusalem today, is it comparable to New York, London, Singapore, Hong Kong? I mean, Dubai. You look at that in the world's eyes, they're always looking at the externals, as we see, 1 Samuel 16 with David. Don't look at him at the externals. But God's point is, this is where He put His name, and therefore it is the most important city in the history of humanity. Because why? Because God chose it, and that's why Satan attacks it. And so when we see it today, there's a lot of acrimony there. And it's just a reminder, again, as we're approaching this end, Babylon, Jerusalem. And you have Babylon, the woman, the harlot, full of blasphemies. And then you have Jerusalem, the what? The holy city. I mean, the Daniel 9:24 says that this is, and Matthew 5, it's the city of the great king, which we know ultimately will be Jesus. So it is not insignificant.
Absolutely not. It's the firstborn city.
Yep.
And so, when it says in the book of Revelation, it says, and Babylon fell, and the cities of the nations fell. Yeah. So people are looking for Babylon, in Iraq or this, or America's Babylon. And Babylon represents that which was dispersed, which refuses to pay allegiance. Yeah. And it incorporates all of the cities of the nations.
Rebellious. Yeah.
All the rebellious city, right? So it's even bigger than what we think. But let's go through a little bit more of the story. We've got about a few minutes, 5 or 7 minutes there, haven't we? So the story of the woman is picked up from the time of Babylon. This woman here, and I say that because it goes on about clothed with the stars, but also the 10 horns and the crowns. And also we know that from Daniel's prophecy, because this is the end. So after all of this time, this woman, Jerusalem, we know Jesus is born in Bethlehem, that's not the point, but he's a son, because he's born in Bethlehem, he's a son of Jerusalem, right?
Which is connected with Rachel, as we know. She's buried there.
That's right. And Bethlehem's just by.
It's just 5 miles away.
5 miles
and he's going to rule from there.
He's going to rule.
Psalm 2, right?
Yeah. So she goes through this birthing process, and the dragon's been stood before this woman for 5 centuries to try and crush the city itself. She gives birth. Immediately, her firstborn son is taken into heaven, and then what we have then is it cuts through then into the last 1,260 days of prophetic history. So it kind of skips 2,000 years.
Yeah, it does. Yep.
It just, because it's a story. It said to Daniel, the angel said, 70 weeks are determined upon your holy city and your people. So that's where we're centering on. Let's have a quick look at here. We read through. Do you want to read through Mondo verse 7 to verse maybe 14 or something?
In Revelation
12?
12?
Revelation 12.
Yep, about the war in heaven.
Yeah.
It says, Revelation 12:7 here, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ, or his Messiah, have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives to the death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time.
Yeah. Just maybe read the next few verses.
Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent.
Okay, so we could just stop there, make some comments. So we see here again the idea of the firstborn being taken, and then it says the dragon goes to make war against the woman, the city, and the rest of her seed. In other words, God's claimed his firstborn. So we have the idea of the firstborn now being presented to he's been presented in Jerusalem, in his father's house in Jerusalem. That's what Jesus calls it, my father's house. Now he goes to his father's house in heaven. He's presented as and he's the firstborn. He's the son of David. He's the son of Joseph. He's the one now who's given all authority in heaven and earth. But we mentioned here about the eagle's wings. I thought that was interesting. Now when I've looked at that, I sort of come to the conclusion, I can't be dogmatic on it, but the eagle's wings might be representative of the 2 witnesses, who are protecting Jerusalem at that time, and they're helping in this great escape. But either way, the eagle's wings are how it describes God's deliverance from Egypt, right? So back there in Exodus 19:4, he says, "I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself."
Supernatural deliverance.
Yeah, what a beautiful picture. I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And then it says here in Exodus 15:12, you stretched out your right hand. Well, the right hand is the firstborn son thing.
Benjamin, the right hand.
Yeah.
Yep,
so he's the firstborn son. You stretched out your firstborn son, and the earth swallowed them. He's talking about those who are coming against, God's people. And we have that here with the dragon who sends out of his mouth and a great river. Is it a great river? And then the earth opens up and swallows the river and that sort of thing. So we got supernatural deliverance here. I see it as also through the 2 witnesses of the who are in the city, declaring the word of the God. And
Revelation 11.
Yep. Absolutely. But what's so beautiful though with this Mondo, it's also a reversal over the cry over Jerusalem when Jesus wept. Which had effectively kind of brought their judgment in AD 70. He says, how often I would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not. In other words, allow yourselves to be gathered. But here now, the eagle's wings come. He swoops down, and that rejection has been reversed. right? Because why? Jesus says, you'll not see me again until you say. Because they've already been crying. The two witnesses have been in the city. And of course, the two witnesses come in the name of the Lord, right? You know, so they've been crying now, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. As the witness of the two witnesses are revealed. And so now this is the preparation. And so he's now gathering them to bear them away on eagle's wings. And that's where we'll finish.
Yeah. And so here we are. I mean, the tale of two cities in the biblical sense,
Amen.
You know, of Babylon and Jerusalem. And so, you know, this particular study has been so fascinating in getting into it and certainly talking with Graham about it. And I hope that you are drawn in as well. And I know many of you are, because you've written in and shared your appreciation for all this history. But as we look forward, I just want to leave you with this, that the reminder here throughout all of history is the choice. Either we're going to serve the Lord, you know, like Joshua, me and my house will serve the Lord, or by definition, we were born by nature, Ephesians 2, as children of wrath. And 1 John talks about the sons of God and children of the devil. And so you have these two competing kingdoms. And so the offer is always there. And that's really our heart. No matter what all these other details we can get, our heart is that you would put your faith and trust in Jesus and become part of the family of God, to be born again into his family and to join in with the tremendous, glorious future that we as Christians have, all believers have, ruling and reigning along with Jesus, where? From the city of the great King. So we appreciate you watching. As always, would you continue to pray for us? That there's always a lot going on spiritually. We'd appreciate your prayers. We also appreciate your support in that as well. But we know that this is a real battle, and your prayers keep us strong. And so thank you for watching. For Graham and myself, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.